another episode of Soulful Study Sunday. My name is Clarissa. I'm the creator of She Rocks at College. And I have a question for you. Have you ever received an exam back and realized that it wasn't the grade that you were expecting? Did you have a hard time understanding what could have possibly gone wrong? You spent about a whole week reading the chapters, writing your notes, studying and preparing for this exam. Maybe you even felt like you knew the information like the back of your hand. You could talk about it, you could answer questions about it in your study group, but when you got to the actual exam, the questions were really difficult for you. You got stuck on them and it seemed like the information that was on the exam was completely different from what you actually studied for. That actually happens more often than you know. And today I want to introduce you to 25-year-old pre-nursing student, Amy. I want you to go ahead and listen to her current academic struggle as a pre-nursing student and tell me if you can relate to what she's experiencing.
Hi guys, my name is Amy. I am 25, about to be 26 years old. I am a nursing student, just like Clarissa, and I am I'm just about to apply to my nursing program, so I just finished the prerequisites. My goal is to be a nurse practitioner, so I've got a little bit of a road ahead of me. My main struggle, I think right now is, I think it's because I have been out of school for so long, I've kind of forgotten how to be a student. And recently I was diagnosed with adult ADHD, and it can make everything a lot more overwhelming if I don't have a very strict schedule to stick to. My main issue with my studying habits is taking information from a textbook and putting it into a way that I can understand it. I make a list of everything that I need to study, and I kind of try to work through it, and I go to some tutoring, but just keeping everything together with all the different subjects that I'm trying to cram into my brain is a struggle for me, especially if I don't have like a study guide or something like that. And then I'll feel like I know the information, but when I get to the test, it feels like something completely different. So I could sit here and I could tell you all about things, but when I'm actually answering the questions, that's where I get stuck. So I don't know the way to fix that. But that's kind of my issue. I'm sorry I've been rambling for so long. Thanks.
In Amy's description of what she's currently experiencing as she's going through her pre-nursing classes, what I'm noticing are two main things. Number one is that she's really struggling with synthesizing the information that she's reading in her textbook. She's having a really hard time trying to simplify it in a way that makes sense to her so that she can then later apply it on the exam. The second issue that I hear from Amy is that she has no way to figure out whether or not she's actually prepared for the exam. She used this one particular sentence that is always a warning sign for me when I work with students one-on-one, and that is, I feel like I knew the information. Every time I hear those words come out of the students that I work with one-on-one's mouth, it makes me really nervous, because feeling like you know the information is not the same thing as knowing you know the information. So today what I'm going to do is you and I are going to help Amy figure out a study plan, a study routine that will help her write and create her own study guide that synthesizes and summarizes the information that she's reading on the exam, so that that information can be her guiding post for how to make sure that she's actually learning the information that she's supposed to learn for the exam and that she actually knows it. So it sounds like Amy's pretty used to having study guides given to her by her professors. Now, if you're not familiar with what study guides are, here in the United States, sometimes professors will give a worksheet or a piece of paper that basically summarizes and synthesizes all of the information that is going to be on the upcoming exam. Now, these study guides can come in various different formats. Sometimes it's just a list of all the topics that are going to be on the exam and what you're expected to know. Sometimes it's the professor's actual notes that you can use to study from. And other times it could just be practice problems or sample problems that you're going to see on an exam. And those sample problems you usually see when you're taking a technical or a math type of course. Not all professors provide study guides. So one of the things that I like to teach students is how to create their own study guides. But what I find is that the students that are already creating study guides are including way too much information, and this sounds like Amy's problem. She doesn't know how to take the information from her textbook, put it into her own words, and only have the key information that she needs for the exam. So what's the solution to that? The solution to that is knowing the purpose of the reading assignments that you're given. This is one of the things that I think is the most difficult for students. They're fearful that if they don't write everything from their PowerPoints or from their textbook into their notes, that they might miss out on something that's important. But if you understand the purpose of your class, if you understand the reason why your professor assigned that particular reading assignment, picked that textbook, and why you're even in the class, you have all the information you need in order to make sure that the information that's in your notes is always the key information that you're going to be tested on. One of the places that you can find out what's important is in your class description. So normally the class description is given to you in your class syllabus, but if it isn't, you can always find it in your course catalog. Now what I've done is I just did a quick Google search for a biology class to see what the description of the class is. And I'm going to go through this description, and along with you, I'm going to show you how the class description actually tells you what's important and what you need to focus on when you read, and that's the information that you want to include in your notes, which will become your study guide. The second place that you want to look at that will serve as your guide as to what's important and to what include in your notes is your course objective. Sometimes there are general course objectives that will be included on your syllabus. Other times you can just use the objectives from your textbook or the objectives on your professor's PowerPoints. And again, I have examples here to show you how you go about using this and to demonstrate to you exactly how it is that this can serve as your guiding post for figuring out how to summarize and synthesize and create your own study guide that always contains the most accurate information that will show up on your exam. So this is a Biology 101 course, and I'm just reading from my computer here. And the course description says, this course should provide you with the concepts and skill that make up the scientific field of biology. Our goal will be to touch upon many topics, finding common themes in the chapters that we cover. We'll thoroughly learn the principles about making connections between material learned at the beginning, middle, and the end of the semester. This is building the foundation of knowledge for your biology. By the end of this semester, you should be able to identify examples and name 5 core themes in biology. You should be able to evaluate a scientific study and determine if its design is sound, so as to evaluate science around vaccines, pseudoscience, etc. You should be able to make conclusions from data and draw graphs. You should be able to describe the new properties that emerge out of each level of hierarchy of life. You should be able to explain what food is and compare and contrast the different food for animals, plants and how they obtain and transform the matter of energy. Describe the flow of information in various signaling pathways and in the flow from DNA to proteins. And you should be able to explain how life on Earth evolved and how adaptations relate to survival, reproduction, and intraspecific interactions. And you should be able to give detailed examples of adaptations in the animal body in which structure fits function at the cellular and whole body level. This professor in this particular syllabus basically told you everything that you're going to learn throughout the semester and everything that you should be able to intellectually talk about. Just from reading that description and those objectives, I already know that I'm going to be required to know how animals, plants, and humans differentiate not only in the type of food that they eat, but how they use that food for energy, how that food converts in the body. From that information, I should be able to tell how signals get transformed both in DNA and in proteins. On the exam, I'm probably going to see questions on how different animals adapt and how their adaptations fit the function of where they live, where they evolved from. I'm probably going to get questions on the scientific method and how the scientific method is used in studies, how it's used in the development of medicine and the development of vaccines and in the development of anything else that is science related. It's the basis of biology. And if I were to go just a little bit deeper and actually looked up the definition of biology, I bet that just from the definition of biology, again, I can get a sense of where my focus needs to be when I'm reading. There is always a purpose to what it is that you're reading. And your job as the student is to figure out what that purpose is. So let's go ahead and look up that definition of biology. So biology is a natural science concerned with the study of life and living organisms. It includes the structure of those living organisms, the function of those living organisms, the growth, evolution, distribution, and taxonomy of those living organisms. And that's it. Everything that I'm going to be learning about, everything that I'm going to be tested on, centers around how living organisms are structured, how they function, how they evolved, how we identify them and classify them, right? We're talking about that word taxonomy. And all of that are the types of questions that I'm going to see on the exam. I'm going to be asked to identify which group a certain animal falls into, how they're classified, what characteristics qualify them to be in that category. I'm going to be asked about how microorganisms function. I'm going to be asked about how germs function. I'm going to be asked about how we as humans function, our internal structures, how they're built, how they function. That's everything that I'm ever going to be tested on. And I just got that information from the definition of biology as well as the course description on the syllabus and the objectives. Now, how does that help Amy? When you know what the purpose is, when you know what the focus is, you know what to look for when you're reading. Your reading is focused because you're searching. At this point, it's a witch hunt. At this point, it is a scavenger hunt. So you're just looking for things that fall into those objectives. You're looking for things that fall into the description of biology because that's all you're ever going to be tested on, because that's the whole purpose of the class. You're there to learn those things. But half the time when we sit down to read, we're sitting down to read just to get through the chapter. We forget that our professor assigned that chapter for a reason. So we need to figure out what that reason is. What are we particularly learning about in that section? And how does that apply to the overall main theme of the class? That's what goes in your notes. And if you ever feel like you don't know how to go about this process, This isn't easy for everybody. It's easy for me now that I understand how to study, now that I understand how to read with the purpose. But at the beginning, it was difficult for me. And one of the things that I had to do was actually go to the source, i.e. my professor, and I had to ask them, what's important for this class? When I read, what am I focusing on? What are you teaching me? What is the purpose of this class if you were to just simplify it for me? Once you know what to look for when you're reading, the second step of creating a study guide that you understand and makes sense is to not write the words in the book on your paper, but instead write as you speak. Don't just copy what you see in the book onto your notes. Make sense of it for yourself. Try to explain it in your own words, so much so that someone who has never taken the biology class before, who has never heard of biology before, can actually understand it. If I were to take the definition of biology and put it in my own words, the way that I would describe it is, biology is a field of science in which we study how we came to be, how we work, and how we are put into categories. That's how I would explain it to a 5-year-old. And it's as simple as that. So the information that goes into your study guide are your course objective answers. Turn them into questions and find the answers to those questions. Those are all of the key points, the key concepts that you're going to be tested on. You can find the course objectives on your syllabus. You can find them at the beginning of most chapters. Sometimes they're called key concepts instead of objectives. And a lot of the times professors will also put them on the PowerPoint. So just turn them into questions and answer the question when you're reading. Look for the answer to the question when you're reading, and that's going to guide your focus. And then all you need to do is put it into your own words. Simplify it. But the key thing is to first know what you're reading for. So the second thing that Amy was struggling with was the fact that she felt like she knew the information, but when she gets to the exam, it doesn't turn out that she actually knew it. So what do we do to make sure that we not just feel like we know the information, but actually know that we know the information? The whole point of studying is to figure out what you don't know, so that you can do something about it, so that you can actually address that knowledge gap. And I've created a 3-step study protocol that builds into your study routine a method for you to test whether or not you actually know what you're supposed to know. And I talked about that 3-step process in the previous video, but I will summarize it in this one. Step number 1 is to acquire the information that you're going to be tested on. You're acquiring the information in lecture and in reading, and now you're reading with a purpose. So you're going to make sure that everything that is in your notes is supposed to be there because you're reading with a purpose. Step number 2 is to test to make sure that you actually learned, understood, and can apply the information that you just acquired. This is the most important part of your studying process. This is how you move from feeling like you know the information to actually knowing that you know the information. Because now what you're doing is you're forcing yourself to test to see, can I actually talk about this in an intellectual manner? Can I actually answer multiple choice type of questions on this information? Can I actually answer an essay type of question with this information that we just learned about in chapter 5? Until you use the information, until you try to apply the information in the same manner that you're going to be asked to apply it on the exam, you cannot say that you actually know the information. And the reason why most students only feel like they know the information is because they completely skip step 2 of the studying process. You need to test to make sure that you actually learned, understood, and can apply the information that you just spent 5,000 hours rewriting into your notes. The best way to do this is by answering the end of chapter questions, by asking your professor for a study guide, by studying with a partner and having them ask you questions, by trying to verbalize the information out loud, not by reading your notes in front of you, but by putting everything away and seeing what you can recall from your own memory. Whenever you run into an issue where you can't recall, you're giving the wrong response, you don't know, you've identified a knowledge gap. At that point, you need to move into step number 3 of this 3-step study protocol, which is to fill in the knowledge gaps, which means to go and relearn the information. Go and get some help trying to understand the information. When you go through this 3-step study protocol, what you're doing is you're figuring out what you know, actually know, not what you feel like you know, but what you actually know. You're making sure that before the exam, you go and you learn everything that you've identified that you actually didn't know, so that everything that could get you into trouble on the exam is eliminated and you can, without a doubt, say that you're actually prepared for the exam. I hope that you found this video helpful. If you have any questions on how to maybe create your own study guide in more detail, or you have questions on actually how to go through the testing process of step 2 in the study protocol, or you're not really sure how to go about the filling in the knowledge gap of the study process, or how to, write notes that make sense to you for maybe your English class or your math class, then I highly suggest that you join us in the Secret Study Society. I am in there as much as I can possibly be, answering questions about how to study and succeed in college, about how to manage your time, and that's really where you're going to get that one-on-one personalized attention. So make sure that you join the Secret Study Society and that you film a video with your struggle, and I will give you my plan of attack in a future Soulful Studies Sunday video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.